What's up, everybody? Welcome back into another episode of the Lawyer You Know podcast. And today we are going to be breaking down another part of this long and extended interview with Karen Reed prior to trial number 2 that you better believe the prosecutors have already requested and gotten all this footage and more, including notes and everything else in the background to see, is there anything they can use in prosecuting Karen Reed round 2? But there are some really interesting nuances to this part of the interview that gets you in the mindset of what it's like to go through something like this, what it's like to have litigation, period, let alone your life being on the line in a criminal case, but civil cases and just being a party to a lawsuit, criminally or civilly, how it takes a toll on your life and what it's like as a client. She explains that in depth. And I got to be honest, there's so many similarities that I've seen with a lot of my clients on different cases. And we can learn a lot about what this process is like. Because that's one of the points of this podcast and the YouTube channel is to learn what the justice system is like, civil and criminal justice system, what it's like to go through it, what your rights are, what's difficult about it, what may be easy about it, not much. So let's take a listen to this interview together, see what we can learn from it. Appreciate you guys being here. Let's get into it.
Legal saga began?
Since the legal saga began, trial was every bit of 10 weeks and then a week or so leading up to it. So that's 100 days, 90 plus days. And then every hearing, at least one day. And that's just not having a license and being out in the suburbs. And I don't have my house anymore. So I'm always in transition of where I'm staying. So, and when Alan and Liza come in and now Bob, and if it's one of our experts, time is of the essence. And I like to be involved in everything. So I certainly don't want my legal team convening and I'm not there. You miss one day of this case on this legal team and you're behind.
So, her circumstances are different. Every client's circumstances are different. She is out on bond, so she's not actually in jail having to prep for her trial, but she has a lot of restrictions and she can't just do whatever she wants. And she had to sell her house because of the fees and the costs and all of that. But how she starts to explain that this case, when your life, your liberty is on the line, it becomes everything to you. It is the most important thing in your life. And for her now, it's been years and years of this. A small percentage of people go through one trial. An even smaller percentage go through 2, which is what she's going through.
We just got a discovery dump today. This tends to happen right before hearing. We get discovery. I wonder if part of that is preempting us saying in court in an open forum that we're still waiting on this, this, and this. So then we get it. And then, we haven't had time to really distill it before we're back in court. But we just got a dump today. And it's nice because a lawyer.
So that lawyers have that same complaint, which is exactly what happens. You file a motion to compel, you don't get the discovery, they give it to you the day or two before the hearing. So it's like, well, technically they did turn it over, Judge, but we don't know if it's everything. We haven't had a chance to digest it. That's completely normal. That happens in mostly civil cases, but also sometimes in criminal cases.
Lawyers are coming in and we're kind of all combing through it. We'll sit down tonight and go through it. We'll have time again tomorrow to go through it. So staying with them helps foster this logistically.
During this time when there is no trial, we see you in court once every 3 months. But what's going on when we're not seeing you? This is it, right?
This is it. I work on the case every day. From when I wake up, I'll take a few breaks. I'll have dinner with friends or with my family or both. But the hearings, those are easy days. I mean, they're easy for me. I don't have to do anything, but it's all the days in between. Now this is the second trial. So for any given witness, there's the initial police reports, or in some cases, no police reports. We've got the state grand jury, then we've had a federal grand jury, and now a trial, and then any interim police reports that involve some of these witnesses. So it's layers of statements, and the inconsistencies are just seemingly endless. So there's always work to do, and it's like finding a needle in a haystack, that the report may look at a first glance to read the same, but then you read it 2 or 3 times and it starts to sink in. We were just looking at a police report, my father and I, a couple mornings ago, early police report from January 29th.
And she mentions her father and her. So as it extends out, it becomes a huge part of your family's life. And we have a lot of times people say, we just want to settle the case, or I just want to take a plea, or whatever it is, because it's taking too much of a toll on me, on my family, on my relationships, on my job, whatever it is, because the toll becomes insurmountable at some point. And you'll also notice that she's going to throw in some things here. She's definitely going to throw in some things that the public watching this is going to try to bring them on her side, right? The inconsistencies, or they're trying to give us Discover on the last day. We think they do it on purpose. She's going to do that throughout, because we have to remember the defense weighed the risks and the benefits of doing this. And by the way, Ted said some of the interview was done with her lawyer. We watched some snippets of that, and some without. So it's really important to realize that this is without her lawyer there. So this is another layer of them saying, look at how honest she is. Look at how she has nothing to hide. That's what they're trying to portray with this. The defense definitely has an angle. They want to portray she's honest, she's transparent, she's not afraid of taking the stand. She'll tell you it straight from her mouth. We're not worried about her. We trust her. She's involved in everything. She is one of the decision makers on the defense team. They want to show that with this. They want the public to see that. But we know the state's looking at it from a different angle, and they will use anything they can.
By Michael Lank.
Keep calling them the state. It's what it is here in my practice, the Commonwealth.
With the Canton PD. And I've read this so many times that I don't know if I've become desensitized to it, but he says to Matt McCabe when he goes into 34 Fairview, if John got in a fight the night before. And I always read that as
and that's documented?
That's documented in the Canton police report from that day, 3 years ago, nearly to the hour to right now. But now that I read it, I'm like, of course he's being asked if he knew of John getting into a fisticuffs, because John looks like he was.
Right.
And those are things that I read in the moment when I was arrested and then arraigned on February 2nd. And I don't quite know the contours of what I'm dealing with. I first think that this is just mistaken. I was hysterical, I was drinking, and they just got the wrong person. And then piece by.
So she says, at first, I just think this is a mistake. I was hysterical and I've been drinking. So been drinking, there's one admission there, right? She admits she's been drinking. How much, whatever, they'll get to that. But as you heard from the last jury, she admits she's drinking, and then they show all these pictures. The jury's not going to say, maybe she just had a little bit, or maybe she didn't finish those, or we didn't see her take every sip. Usually jurors are not going to do that. I know a lot of people online we may talk about it in our chat. We may break it down, frame by frame, but usually jurors are like, okay, she admitted drinking. She had way too much to drink, period. Let's start there. That doesn't mean she hit somebody, but you heard at the last jury that once they kind of crossed that bridge of drinking and driving, it was easy for them to imagine and fill holes wherever they may have found them. So that is something that the state may use. She also says, I thought at first just a mistake happened. I would be willing to guess that maybe Hank Brennan will use that towards the negligence that is involved in some of these criminal charges. She even admits drinking in an accident happened. Now she adds context, and then I figured out the whole conspiracy and stuff, but those words being parsed in a transcript may look different than they sound in an interview that we're watching together real time.
The piece that came together, like they got the right person. I'm the wrong person, but for them, I was the right person. Now, 3 years later, looking at a police report that I got on February, actually David came and brought it to the holding cell at the Stoughton District Courthouse on February 2nd, right before I was arraigned. You see something every time that you just can't see without repetition. Your eyes like preempt what what the next word is, what the next sentence, and it doesn't have the same meaning to you today on January 29th, 2025 that it did in 2022.
So are you going through all the police reports?
And that repetition, that comparison, that base of knowledge that you have and how you're looking at all of it, which a lot of people online have, as now with this case too, they've been living this case, right, for years. The jury doesn't have that. And people are going to hold that against the jury. But you as a lawyer, as a trial lawyer, you know that. You know the jury doesn't have that. So it's your job to highlight it and make it loud and clear what the biggest and most important inconsistencies are and what shows reasonable doubt or your theory of the case, if you have one and want to prove that there was more to this and you're trying to prove a conspiracy.
Reports that you've looked at prior and all the statements, you're going through everything again.
You got to go through everything again, because every time you get something new, it's not what is this on its face in my case, it's what's changed. What are they saying now versus what did they say 6 months ago, 12, 18 months ago? So you're always doing, I've got some things in a spreadsheet, that's how my mind has always worked, but some things you just have to read. You've got to go through the court minutes, go through the transcripts, but a police report today, we'll read something. Liza and I were on the phone on the way up here, and it's, wait a minute, what did this witness say, or what did this responding officer say back on February 10th, 2022? Well, now he's saying this. So you've got to always compare and see what's changed.
Do you feel like you've gotten more astute doing this now for 3 years?
I feel I understand now I understand better how it's going to play in court. I think of things I was texting David constantly in the early days of this. I'd find something and I think, well, can't we go talk to this person? And they'll say it didn't happen that way. And now I know better how tough it is to get, especially in my case, how tough it is to get something admitted.
In lots of cases, it's like that, right? People don't want to testify for a defendant usually unless you're connected to them, right? Biased towards them, their father, their friend, whatever it may be. That's something that's very common. But also statements change, memories change. I cannot tell you how many times clients want to go interview 50 witnesses that they say for sure will be good witnesses for them. Half of them we can't find. Half of them don't say what our client expects them to say, and half of them will be good. But even half of the ones that are good don't want to come testify, don't want to get involved, don't want to talk to us. So there's always, it seems so simple, right? There are these witnesses, it should be so easy. I know exactly what they're going to say, but it is always more complicated than that.
Even going into trial with my seasoned attorneys, there were things we thought we could show, like an exhibit, for example, like one witness, Christina Hanley, the key part of her forensic report at the MSP lab, and she's just a scientist, a civilian, but the glass on the bumper that was photographed on the bumper does not match the cocktail glass, So that means it's from another piece of glass. So that had to have been two breaking events. There's the glass that was found around John's body, the base, I think it was Lank that pulled it out with his gloves on, or maybe it was Buchnick, the base of the cocktail glass. That is scientifically proven by the state police, Christina Hanley, not to be the glass that was on the bumper.
But I think the jury was left in the first trial with the impression that it was the glass.
Yes, because it's so confusing. Nothing.
And that's true too. You start to learn confusing the jury is part of the game. And some lawyers do it a lot more than others. And it's really frustrating. They confuse them by using certain rules, like we talk about, what they can know, what they can't know, what comes into evidence and what doesn't. And it's very legitimate how those rules are made. But then sometimes they're used in ways that leave a jury with a false impression. And it is very frustrating. And I don't care how seasoned of a lawyer you are. I don't care how good of a lawyer you are. I don't care how many cases and trials you've won or had. You're still going to think certain things might happen and they don't happen because it's the judge that may disagree with you. You're two different lawyers. You're a lawyer, they're the judge, but you're two different lawyers reading a rule, trying to make a decision. And unless you're in lockstep with the judge the entire trial, there's going to be things you think you can get in or that you don't think are going to come in, and they do because the judge makes a call. And that's why trial lawyers have to always be adapting.
Things referred to as the cocktail glass or the bumper glass or the lawn glass. It's 7-1, item 5,
Right.
or item A, or 7-12, items A, B, C, D, and E. And then there's more glass found by Proctor, and that's 7-13, item A. And when you have the scientist who, my guess is worried that we're trying to impeach her, when we're in fact not, we just wanted her to present the report. And this is, I don't know when she testified, but it's mid-trial, it's 2 p.m, it's 80 degrees outside, and you see jurors' eyes glass over, and I know what's coming. I know what that report is, and it doesn't come out cleanly. So we were thinking going into trial,
Which again, some people think that was a strategy by Lally, bore them to death, have them falling asleep, so that when the defense presents certain things, maybe they don't hit like the defense expected them to. Oh man, I love today's sponsor. It's Quince. It has become a staple now. Whenever I have a chance to go look for some clothes, I start with Quince. I got this jacket on Quince and I absolutely love it. It is plenty warm when it's cold outside in Florida because I also like to layer, take something off and just have a shirt on underneath. Or if you're in cold climates, walk into the heat. Easy to just take a jacket off. And I love jackets that mix and match with other outfits, blacks, grays, blues, tans like this. And Quince has tons of those that you can use many different ways in your wardrobe and in your different, whatever fashion you're going for that day. And the best part about it is all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices, along with premium fabrics and finishes. And I love that. I wear this all the time. My wife even steals it and uses it as kind of an oversized jacket, which I always find funny. So indulge in affordable luxury. Go to quince.com/LYK for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QINCE.com/LYK to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/LYK.
could summarize what she was saying using her own acronyms and abbreviations. Here's 712, here's 713, no match, something like that. And that exhibit was denied. So we were learning on the fly things we
Not
thought.
having it at sidebar, correct? Because I don't remember.
We have it at sidebar.
Okay. So this is a very familiar spot in Boston for you. This is your old life.
This is my old life that I go by probably once a week. I took the train in and out of South Station every day to where I lived in Mansfield. And I'd come out the back, and this is where I worked for 15 years, Fidelity at 245 Summer Street. And
Equity analyst was your title.
I was equity research. My role was a sector specialist, and it was in this building at 245.
Do you still stay in contact with any of the people you work
I
with?
do. I would say about half of my donations have come from former colleagues at Fidelity. Half of what you're aware of that you can see has come from former Fidelity colleagues. So it's funny, Ted. I was sent home from Fidelity from that building, I want to say the second week in February 2020, the pandemic. And I remember talking to someone on the subway. I took like a 2 p.m. train back to Mansfield. I was talking to someone else who had been sent home from a job, a different facility. Because of COVID. And we were saying, well, we'll be back in a week, right? 2 weeks. Little did I know, I'd reconnect with someone I had dated nearly 20 years earlier in 2004. I'd be working from home for 2 years, and then he would be tragically killed, murdered. And I've been framed for it. And I never would set foot in that building again. So it was a pandemic, and then I was suspended from Fidelity officially as soon as I was indicted.
Is that their policy?
I would think so. I would think so, that it means there's been some due process.
Is there hard feelings about that? Or could you even have kept your job even if you wanted to?
I would not be capable of having that responsibility to shareholders and trying to save my own life. I was bitter at first, but...
Which again, I think is an interesting thought. Like, she feels like it's impossible to fight for her own life because of how much work and how much there is involved, especially with her legal team. Imagine how people feel with lawyers that maybe they didn't choose on their own or are not the ones that they wanted and they couldn't get. And they still have to have their job and try to provide for their family. It's a system and a situation that feels impossible sometimes. And that's why the presumption of innocence, the defendant's rights, we can't convict them right away. We have to realize there are issues. It's an imperfect system.
I understand it. I just had such strong, tender feelings and I still do, for Fidelity. I would have stayed there forever. I was very happy there. But as former coworkers have reached out, have donated incredibly generously, I feel like, all right, it's the company is the people, and they've been there for me. And
do you miss that?
I miss working every day. I miss just being ordinary and not feeling like people are looking at me everywhere I go.
Does that happen?
It does. I don't know that everyone is, but I know people approach me everywhere I go, and I have to imagine there's people who aren't approaching me that recognize me. But I've come to terms with the fact, Ted, that this is what my purpose is in my life. It wasn't working at Fidelity. It wasn't teaching a night class at Bentley. Those jobs are replaceable. Someone else is doing the job. Someone else is teaching. Someone else is the dean at Bentley now that my father's gone. And we're here to shed light on the corruption that exists in this state. And I feel humbled by it in some ways. It's a nightmare, and I wish it never happened. But I also feel that I can handle this, and I don't feel weaker. As it goes, I feel stronger. And the public support is the restoration of my reputation, which was a big loss, has re-energized me, has energized me, rejuvenated me. But this is what I'm here for. And I get messages constantly mainly from people I've never met and from people that are suffering. And it's a lot of women that have either had like a physical loss of a spouse or a child, or an illness similar to mine, or with a colostomy bag, or have been the victim of police harassment or some type of unfairness with the criminal justice system.
And some people are going to hate her for trying to act like she's some hero. Other people are going to love her and call her their hero. She, again, I think is talking to the people that support her supporters, her purpose for doing this, build that up, continue that groundswell because they feel it. Maybe you can call it a commercial, right? An advertising pitch to get people to donate to the fund and to get behind the cause. Feels like that's part of what this pitch is and part of the purpose of this interview.
And there's a lot of suffering in this world. Mine is just very visible, but I do feel honored isn't the right word, but I'm humbled by it. And I feel like this is your purpose. And a lot of people have purposes thrust on them that they didn't really want.
So people will stop you on these streets. What do they say to you?
A lot of times, so I just went to the cobbler to get shoes that I'm going to wear to court this week that I wore out during trial. And the cobbler on
The cobbler. Isn't that funny? She goes to the cobbler. Is that a Massachusetts thing? That reminds me of like my history class or something when I watch I watch a period piece drama. The cobbler. Went to the cobbler for my shoes.
On street, and someone in the shop said to me, just very respectfully, hang in there. And a lot of people are pulling for you. I hear that probably the most, if I could generalize the sentiment. We're pulling for you.
So you have to also realize, right? Like, let's say She goes to trial the second time and gets convicted. Now she goes to prison. Of course, she'll have a lot of appellate arguments and the fight won't end there, but you become a lot less visible. You're a lot less helpful. You're a lot less involved when you're sitting in prison, because when you're sitting in prison for a crime, I don't know, let's just assume especially if she's convicted of second-degree murder, the worst charge, a very serious crime, violent crime with intent, right? That's not something you're going to get out on appeal for. Now, if she's just convicted of count 3, then maybe she can be out on appeal. Even maybe a lesser included of count 2, that's going to be up to the judge, though, weighing the factors. What do you think will happen there? But think of what happens to this person's life, to her family's life, to what happened throughout this entire process, and if it goes there. I mean, it's going to be eerie watching some of these back if that happens.
Hang in there. I was walking through the Common when the weather was warmer in the fall with an old friend from Fidelity, and someone just was running, some guy maybe about 25, 30 years old, running through the Common, and he waited until he passed me. And this was about 5 o'clock. There were people everywhere, and he just yelled, "Free Karen Grieve." People will yell that in a busy area, but it's constant. And it's heartwarming to me that this is my old stomping grounds. I used to live here in the building on the other side of this park lane. That was my first apartment. I met my best girlfriend there, and then I started working at Fidelity.
Were you in your 20s when you all started?
I was in my 20s when I started at Fidelity. I'd been somewhere before that, but this area is comfortable to me. And there was a year that was kind of in hibernation where the general public did not know the truth of what had happened.
Right.
So I didn't know when I went out, what are people thinking? I would go check my mail or bring my garbage.
The general public did not know about the truth of what happened, right? Again, just keep an eye out for those, and that she's specifically saying certain things so that they get out there publicly.
Barrels in at night. I'd wait until nighttime, and then I'd go out to the street on Gilbert Street where I used to live in Mansfield, and I just didn't want anyone looking at me or wondering or judging. And now I can only go out when I have energy and I'm ready to engage and I'm receptive to it. I mean, if we're having a rough day with a case or something personal, I can't just go out and be anonymous and just sit and.
Because someone will approach you.
Someone will approach you, but it always feels good,
Yep.
and it makes me think. Right, these are common people. These are the jurors.
Yep.
And I've had one experience with someone saying,
"These are common people. These are the jurors." Again, she's picturing the public as the jurors, which is smart, but also feels like she's talking to prospective jurors, right? But knowing that prospective jurors that already make up their mind, can't be fair and unbiased, can't end up on the jury. There's no gag order. She's not a lawyer. It's not really the rules of professional conduct. So is she out there trying to convince jurors? Is she affecting the jury pool? I don't know. But again, we've talked a lot about, do they want to move this case out of here? I don't think so.
saying something negative to me. And I've had, I don't know, countless, during trial, every time we went somewhere on an average night or an average lunch outing, 20 people. In the summer during trial in this neighborhood, we'd have 15 to 20 people just to go out for lunch for an hour. We'd get stopped that many times. It does feel good. The contrast with what it was like before this, before people knew, it does feel good. It's just takes a lot out of you.
Have you always been high energy and sort of on the move, or have you had to sort of reach deep?
I've always worked well under pressure. I've had other challenges in my life, and I always feel stronger after I overcome them. What I've had to learn to do is keep things in perspective, not let the evil that's entered my life take over how I feel about people in general. And that's another reason when I'm out in a busy area, it's like, right, this is humanity. It's just, there's a few powerful people who don't have good intentions that have a lot of control over my life right now. But yeah, I've been, I would say, yeah, high energy. I mean, I was sick for a while, so
Yep.
Notwithstanding that period, but I don't usually crumble under stress.
In your day-to-day, sort of since the first trial ended, would you say that, do you get any free time? Like if you're going to decompress, like what's that going to be? What's that? Do you like listening to music? Do you have shows, books? Where do you find that sort of, where do you get that rejuvenation from?
I feel the best when I'm working on the case. If I have a dinner planned with someone, and inevitably the conversation at the dinner table always turns to the case, or someone comes over and wants to talk about the case. I do have shows. I try to make it a policy, Ted, unless something is really pressing that comes up at night. I try by 8 or 9 o'clock to put some thoughtless TV on, a reality show or a movie, something fictional that I've wanted to see, just to help me sleep. And, the first year, the first 6 months, a year of this hell, I had nightmares. I dreamed about John. I dreamed about finding him. I had this recurring dream that he survived but didn't know what happened to him. I've not had that dream in a long time. But I found I've got to try to force my brain to shut off, and then it becomes muscle memory. Then by 10 or 11 o'clock at night, once you practice, in my experience anyway, once you practice a routine enough, it becomes easier.
When does the day start? If it ends around 8 o'clock.
So again, this is a really good insight to me. Like when I was watching this, I was like, I feel like I'm having some conversations with my clients when they live, eat, breathe the case, right? This is not the only case for these lawyers. And they feel that way sometimes. And they feel like this is the only thing they're thinking about, but they have lots of clients who probably feel the same exact way as Karen Reed, right? Whose lives are encompassed by this case and it revolves just around this case, their whole world. And so just to give you a little insight about what lawyers deal with clients, you can be good clients. I'm not saying they're bad people for this. We know it and we expect it, but it's part of being a lawyer and managing how this works and what the expectations are and who's going to do what and how much time is going to be spent on something, because every case truly is important, civil or criminal. If you decide to take a case as a lawyer, it better be very important to you and for you, and you better do the best job you can.
O'clock at night, are you working from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. typically?
Yeah, I mean, there's breaks. I'll take breaks. I'll do stuff. Until recently, I lived in my...
That's tough. I mean, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. every single day, hard to believe. But whenever she is working or thinking or using her brain, I believe that it is on this case.
My house, I would do projects. I'd wallpaper or paint or work in my yard, just for health reasons, just to get fresh air, get sun on my face.
Do you ever running, or do you?
Yeah, I actually sold my treadmill to my neighbor when I moved, so I don't really run anymore. I try to lift weights every day for at least 20 or 30 minutes. Is
that also therapeutic?
Yeah, it is. I listen to music all the time.
Who do you like?
U2 is my favorite.
Okay.
But I love anything. I love classic rock, alt rock. Seems all my friends are getting into country or have been.
Yeah.
And it's an acquired taste. I'm trying.
Yeah, no, I haven't jumped on that bandwagon yet.
I can't. I've been told my music all sounds the same, so I don't like telling other people that, but I kind of have to tell country music fans that this all sounds the same to me.
Have you been able to survive the last 3 years without falling into a depression, or have you and come out? Are you still in it?
No, I haven't, Ted. I felt grief at the loss of John, and I've never been with someone so intimately, and then they're just gone from the earth. It's not like other relationships I've had where at least they're there. You may pass them on the street or you may text them. The day after he died on January 30th, David told me I needed to hire a private investigator, and I did right away. And on January 30th, he drove to my parents. It was still snowing the day after John was killed. My PI picked me up and he said, we need to go retrieve.
By the way, when we talk about cases and my type of case, like a truck accident or, whatever it may be, some kind of premises case where somebody did something wrong, the ceiling fell down on somebody, whatever, the other lawyers, the defense lawyers always want to say accident and incident. We always want to say crash or destruction, or because of them, this crushed somebody. It was crushing, whatever. The language you use is really important. And she is very clear not to call it an accident, what happened to John, not just when John died, not just when John passed away, but when he was taken, killed, they did this, conspiracy, cover up, things like that. She makes sure to say with what the defense theory is. So anybody just listening to this and what your muscle memory is and what the first thing you think about when you think about this case, she makes sure it is not an accident. It was not a car accident. It was not just an incident. This was purposeful, and they took him. They took his life. And it was them, they. Who? Not sure. But it was them and they. I mean, not sure is what they said in this interview. And they said, it's not for us to prove, basically, or for us to know.
Trace your steps.
You did that on the 30th?
I did it on the 30th. And it was one of the worst days of my life. No disrespect to my PI, who I love. And I'm sure he was equally uncomfortable. But I could barely even get ready to leave. I had just cleaned up for the first time. I'd still, up until that point, still had John's blood in my hair. I didn't have any clothes because I didn't think I wasn't going back to John's house. And we retraced my steps, and I drove by John's house, and there had to have been 20 cars, maybe more, wrapped around the block. And I felt like I was looking in on my life from the sky. That window, all my things are in there. I was just in there with him, and now I'm gone, and he's gone, and he's never going back, and they're mourning him, and I'm not there. And so those first few months, I think I started to get my sea legs. My two best friends, my best friend and her husband came, and we rented an Airbnb in Newport for 3 days at the end of March. It was cold. It was raining the whole time. We had dinner, and then we just went back and talked about the case. And it was very emotional, just a lot of emotions from all of us. And they had spent a lot of time with John. And David reached out to me while I...
So you start hearing stuff like this, like my PI and I did this, my friend and I went here and talked. Will those people become witnesses? In my types of cases, I would at least want to depose those witnesses, right? And see, what did they say? Are they going to be good for us? Are they going to be bad for us? Is there something we can learn from them? What did Karen Read tell you? That's all admissible. That's not hearsay because she is a party opponent. She is the defendant. So will any of that be part of the trial? Will the Commonwealth try to seek out any information from these people that she's saying in this interview that she spoke? This is like having somewhat of an informal deposition of the defendant. Now, she's not answering all the questions you would have for her as a prosecutor, but she's definitely giving you a lot of information throughout these interviews. And I didn't listen to any of the interviews before trial one. Maybe she said all this before. I don't think so. I think a lot of this is different, new, added information or context.
I was down in Newport. He said, we've got some discovery. And we hadn't gotten anything but the initial police report.
This is March 20.
This is late March 2022. I was reading the discovery, and they were implying in this report from Michael Proctor that I had deleted ring footage from John's house. That was the first time. It almost jolted me, Ted, back to, you've got to start fighting. They're coming for you. This is not a case of they misconstrued my behavior or were told things that weren't accurate about me that morning. This was, now they've got me deleting things. This is nefarious. What they're accusing me of is nefarious behavior, and the way they're doing it is nefarious. And I realized.
So again, is she really mad that they're saying it wasn't an accident? Is that something the prosecutors can use? Maybe a stretch, but don't put it past any lawyers to try and use specific words to go a certain direction.
Realized then when they drove me back to my house in Mansfield, this is getting even more serious than it already was. And I had my routine dealing with the grief, and I woke up every morning, I prayed. I missed the kids very much at first, and my dad would come. John's niece and nephew. My dad would come over almost every day, and the O'Keefes had taken out a stay away order almost immediately, within like 48 or 72 hours. So it wasn't even an option to reach out to them. It was like they were gone too. And my dad picked up my rosary beads, which were on an end table in my living room. And he said, when you think about them and you feel helpless, that you can't reach out to, you just pray for them. That's all you can do. So that was part of my morning routine. I would read, I would pray, because I was up very early. And then I started to get into this routine of working on the case from like 10 a.m. to whenever it started to get dark. And I'd call one of the attorneys, or I'd call someone in my family or one of my friends, like, this doesn't sound right. This doesn't look right. These times aren't right. These names aren't right. And then it's been a steady, I get really charged. I feel like I'm fighting. I'm covering ground, and I'm doing something constructive. I can't litigate this. I don't know legally how to maneuver, but I can at least help provide my attorneys with the materials they need to put together a motion or a cross-examination. I can do that dirty work.
How much of the day-to-day decisions are Karen Read?
So she's doing a lot of work on her defense. Again, same thing that Alan Jackson confirmed in the last interview. When you have a client that can really help, either with their experience, background, expertise, intelligence level, time, right? Just having time. A lot of clients don't have the time to invest in the case. Like she mentioned before, it would be impossible for her to keep her job. Most clients do have to keep their jobs. So she's really in the best setup situation you could possibly be in as a criminal defendant. I know it may not feel that way or sound that way, but so many people in this situation do not have the setup that she has. And that is a huge help to her legal team.
I have a strong vote in the decisions. I will always defer to Alan and David and Liza. They know best. They have the experience. But the longer this goes, I have more confidence in my decisions. Things I've suspected were happening or that are going to happen have happened. And I think that's because this is my only experience in this arena, and it's been very negative. And the motives of players in this, on behalf of law enforcement, are disingenuous, to put it mildly. And I think David and Alan have a wider sample with wider outcomes than I do. They've worked with honest cops, honest DAs. So I'm much more pessimistic right now. And therefore, I just happen to be better calibrated than they are.
So it's funny. She says she's better calibrated than her lawyers when it comes to just basically assuming the corruption in the DA's office, law enforcement, et cetera, because Jackson and Yannetti have experiences of there are some good cops, there are good judges, there are good prosecutors, there are, good people working on cases, good investigations, and they're comparing it to that, and they're giving people benefit of the, this is what I'm reading into this, they're giving people benefit of the doubt, and she's not. And I got to be honest, I've been accused of the same thing, right? By the people online. They're like, he just assumes because he's worked with good cops or good prosecutors or good judges before, he doesn't get it, he doesn't understand it. Fine, fair criticism. I am bringing that experience to the table in our explanations so that I can tell you how it normally works. And sometimes that can highlight it when it's really bad, like this investigation was, or like Proctor was with his comments and conversations about Karen Reed and her case. But I thought it was funny that she had that same complaint about her own lawyers, that they don't get it quite like she does because this is the only thing she's been through. So every time she basically assumes the worst and it becomes true, it's because that's how it is here or for her. And they don't get that because they don't make those same assumptions because that's not how every case is. And we've talked a lot about how this case is different.
It sounds to me like maybe it wasn't a seminal moment, but there was a time that, the grief was so heavy, and it's almost like you felt you were getting backed into a corner by what you were seeing in like the filings and the accusations, that kind of.
I think I channeled the grief into something constructive. And then somewhere in the middle of it all, I think I know that the lowest point of this whole thing for me, apart from 6 a.m. on January 29th, was getting rearrested. And now I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't physically expecting it. I wasn't mentally or emotionally. And then legally, I didn't even know you could be upcharged. I didn't even know that was a thing. I was expecting to be indicted because of, ham sandwiches, but I wasn't expecting to be indicted for intentionally.
She means you can indict a ham sandwich. Basically, they always indict if you bring it, which is basically true.
Doing this now. And so somewhere in the middle of all that, there's no time. There's no space to mourn anymore. Think about your previous life. It's like they've held me back at the starting blocks, and they've had this massive head start. I've got to catch up, and I've just got to put my head down and work. And it's been like that ever since. I mean, even if I get away, if I go see friends in Florida, I stay and work on the case, and then they pick me up for dinner, and we go out for 3 hours. And then it's, I'm getting some vitamin D and some sunlight, but other than that, it's the case, and that's how I feel best. I'll be so happy when it's over, but until I'm acquitted, this is the only thing that calms me down. I feel good going to bed at night knowing I've put in a solid chunk of time, that if I have to sift through these lies and this.
It's like, again, sift through the lies. That's the language she uses. But again, I understand where she's coming from, where you feel like you're accomplishing something every day towards your goal, which is your, purpose in life, which for her is this case. So she's saying every day she's trying to work on this case.
Chunk of time, that if I have to sift through these lies and this knot of lies, I'll just undo it thread by thread, and I'll take whatever you wanted to show.
How many pieces of paper have you put your hands on in this case?
I've worked a lot online. A lot of it is in Dropbox, and that was necessitated by being in this car and getting a call from, like, the whole ride up here. I was talking to Liza, and we just got Discovery, and there's not time, and it's not really efficient to print out whatever we got today, 200 pages, and digest it. But I can flip through my phone or my laptop. So, but if I were to convert it to paper, Ted, at this point, it's probably around like 10,000, I'd say, on top of videos, hundreds of Ring videos, hours of video from the waterfall, from C.F. McCarthy's, voicemails, phone records. Even that, we downloaded Jen McCabe's Great Key Extraction, and we were in the physical analyzer for Celebrate. It's you don't even know where to start. Do I look at when was her phone unlocked? When was it vertical versus horizontal? Was there a temperature change in the phone? Was there an elevation change? When was the phone unlocked?
That's how.
And she sounds somewhat like a lawyer, getting on this case, and you become an expert in all these things that you might not have known anything about them before, which is always interesting to me. Like when you learn about temperature changes and phone going, up or down, and elevation changing, and everything that a phone tracks, and you start to learn what it actually means on a report and what you can use and can't use. That's how invested in this case she is, which makes sense.
Granular you're getting?
Yeah, because you just don't know like John's phone, for example, when it was locked, when it was in, when the backlight was on, when did he read his last text? And Jen, for example, we went through all her location data. Well, Rick Green did, but then Rick gives us access to Celebrate, so I can go through it myself. it wasn't until trial started, the jury was impaneled, and Rick called us and said, on a whim, I started looking at Jen's location data for the days immediately following January 29th. And does this address mean anything to you? And it was Michael Lang's address.
Well, that came up in trial.
And that came up at trial. And then...
So her expert just kind of found that on a whim, and they were able to put all that together. Now, if they had the information, which I think it sounds like they had it for a while, they could have found that. So the fact that it came out late is just because they looked at it again, which happens in cases. We've seen that happen in like every single case, right? Where new information comes up during trial, because that's when you're all dug in. And that is another thing that is evidence of lawyers have other cases. But when they're trying a case, it's pretty much they live, eat, and breathe just that case, which is why many times some new things come up, new things, new ways to look at it, new theories, new arguments. And the way the system's set up is just kind of is how it is, right? It moves so slowly. Will we ever get to trial? Cases keep getting kicked, continued. Some lawyers delay cases. But I can't tell you how many cases I have that right before they get to trial, the other side wants to depose 5 witnesses. It's like, why didn't you depose in the last 2 years we've been litigating this case? But it's like, oh, well, we looked at it differently, looked at it a little bit closer. We need to do it in the interest of justice, and stuff like that happens.
They tried to preempt it by this police report that we got after Jen took the stand, after she's already gone, saying, yeah, Jen was there. I don't know what her story was, trading cupcake recipes with Lang's wife. Once again, at a lead investigator's house on this case, but he wasn't there. She was talking to the wife, which is a story.
Right, and she said she never got out of the car.
Said she never got out of the car. This was, I think, the date at Lang's house was January 30th. It was still snowing that day.
By the way, definitely this interview feels a little like, actually, never mind. I'll save that.
It's freezing, but she doesn't get out. They sit, and she said, I think she said it could have been a half hour. They're just sitting in the driveway, which doesn't make much common sense. But that location data had to be parsed from all her location data that comes in latitude and longitude coordinates with like 6 decimal places. And if you see negative 42.87356, it doesn't mean anything to you. You've got to then translate it to a map using another software. And then a lot of it's all around her house. And then maybe it's at the grocery store. And
did that come from the feds?
That Jen's phone, Jen turned in herself. But it's so tedious. And that was a big data point.
And turned in herself?
Point that she was at his house. And we didn't find it until 2 years into this. There's always more to find. So it's not as if I'm retreading tracks, trying to find something I might have missed. There's always more ground to cover. And now that the case is so public and people are so supportive, now it's trying to digest these tips and which ones are fake.
So now again, they get into tips. She's already talked about how much she appreciates the support. They buy her dinner, people saying, I'm with you. And it makes her feel really good. And she knows these common folk people out there that are supporting her are potential jurors. She talks about funding, right? The funding she got and how a big chunk of it comes from Fidelity people. And now she's going to get the tips. So it's like if you're setting up a business and you want to make a pitch in a video interview like she's doing, and you hit the important things. You want to get the jurors, the decision makers, right, who are going to determine the success or the failure of what it is you're trying to pitch. You want to get money to help you, push your cause along and fund your cause and your business. And then now you want help. How can you do it better? What do you need to do? Can you give me any information that can help me win? Those are the tips. So she's promoting all of that, trying to get that to come in because that is going to help her defense. That is going to give her the best chance to win. That is the thought process as to why do you take this risk to have a criminal defendant in a criminal case that's actively going on? Why do you have her give such a long interview knowing, because they already know from all the other things that have happened with the other interviews, the Commonwealth's going to get their hands on all of this, even more than what we're watching.
First of all,
so people send you tips.
We get tips constantly. A lot go directly to David and or Alan. Some come over Facebook. Some go to the administrators of the social media pages.
What is the normal procedure? Your attorneys will meet, several days, the night before?
Whatever they can afford to do.
Yeah, Alan Jackson's coming in tonight for a Friday hearing. And so are you essentially war rooming until that hearing?
Yeah, we'll war room. We have a few tips we want to follow up on. Alan tries to jam the schedule. If there's somebody that wants to meet with us that might tell us something useful, we'll schedule it. We'll cram in as much as we can get in.
So you're still developing information?
Yeah. We got information today about John's phone that is exculpatory.
But from outside sources as well, not
from outside. Yeah, no, from outside. But sometimes, Ted, it's the internal discovery that opens up another door, another rabbit hole we've got to go down that might make sense with something we've heard. It's constant triangulation of what do we know? What have we been given in discovery? Of that discovery, how much can we actually rely on? How much do we think is manufactured? And then does it dovetail with anything we've heard from people in the community?
Right.
I mean, if I could afford to, I would have the lawyers and I'd have more PIs. My PI is great, but we throw everything at them, and we'd be trying to follow leads.
Does your private investigator work full time for you?
No.
So
no.
It's as it comes. So.
Yeah. Sometimes I won't speak to him for a month, but he's always following things, following the case, and just give him a heads up, day's notice. And
again, your team can always be bigger. They can always be better. You can always have more money. I don't care if you have the best lawyers, best PI. You could have more lawyers. You could have more PIs, more time, more research spent on the case. Basically, everybody feels that way, right? Everybody always wants more because 100 people can do more than 5. But sometimes you can get into a situation where you do have too many cooks in the kitchen. So you have to be careful of balancing that.
He's going to meet
I actually don't think more is always better. Sometimes it can confuse you. Sometimes you can get too much and confuse the jury and throw too much of the jury. Sometimes simpler is better. But obviously, this is not your average case. Like, that's clear.
Tomorrow in the afternoon to track down a few things. A lot of it ends up being nothing, or it's something that's not admissible. A ton of it is hearsay, which is something I didn't know anything about going into this. Well, someone heard from someone else that parts of the basement were replaced or something was broken in the house, and can't go anywhere with it.
So does Robert Alessi then, does he take part in like this sort of day-to-day stuff, or is he more focused on sort of, like he was critical in the Dr. Russell? So is that, are portions of the case divvied up then to different people to work on?
Yeah. So ideally we would be full-time trial prep, or at least full-time for me. And when the lawyers are working on my case, it's trial prep. And now we've gotten this curveball for these job work requests that it's. And
so now she's going to start talking about the ARCA stuff. And this was recorded before any of the most recent hearings with, the allegations of lies, not having candor with the court, and the Rule 14 discovery violations and all of that. But it's very interesting, right? I feel like we had a hearing last week dealing with this issue, this week dealing with this issue. Next week, you're going to be listening to this on Monday, where this is kind of the third set of hearings on stuff that we're already talking about that is not trial prep. So now you also get into the fact that when all this stuff explodes right before trial, you have to take your time. You have to deal with it. You can get a lawyer thrown off the case. You could lose experts. That's huge. The most important evidence in the case. That'll change everything. So you have to focus 100% on that, which means you're not focusing 100% on trial prep. And we're basically a month away from trial. That's an issue. That's a problem. That's not what you want as a lawyer. That's very frustrating when that happens to us, where they, again, wanted to depose these 5 witnesses that could change everything when they had all this time to do it, and now it's exploding before us. Both sides have to deal with it. It's what makes being a trial lawyer so difficult. Just another thing. And she illustrates it here like we should be doing trial prep, but we're not. Now should be, like when you get, 2-3 weeks out from trial, now should be fully trial prep mode. Maybe even longer, depending on how long the trial should go.
And we're expecting more. So we've gone through Dr. Russell on the dog bites, now Rick Green on the Google search.
So for people who don't understand this, so you only had, 6 people testify in the first trial. And for the second trial, the prosecution is trying to prevent
most of them.
How many experts are they trying to prevent right now?
I don't know where they're going to go with ARCA, but I think
so they did file a motion about the ARCA guys.
They did file a motion. They actually filed an intent to file the motion about ARCA. They're trying to accuse us of a discovery violation that they don't have all the available information on ARCA. I didn't hire ARCA.
Right. And that information can only come from the feds.
That information can only come from the feds. So that's 4. We're not calling back.
Well, there's definitely more information that they could turn over from ARCA at this point, which I think this was done in January of this year, so about a month ago. And then they did eventually turn it over after this interview. So there was more discovery. So we can't just go forward as if there was no discovery and nothing that they had to turn over. The judge told them they had to turn it over, and they did turn it over. So stuff existed. Was it material? Was it prejudicial? Would it have changed anything in the first trial? No. Is it discovery that's going to be used in the second trial? You better believe it. If, and I believe when ARCA is called, the prosecutors are going to get up and say, $24,000 Karen Reed paid you for your work on this case. They're going to be able to say that. That matters. That's discoverable. Now, at the time of the first trial, they did not have that. They would not have been able to say that. They did not pay them that money. So that's why there's no prejudice to the first trial. And they turned it over within the discovery period. So they should not be struck and it shouldn't cause any prejudice to this trial. But there is more discovery. It does exist than just what the feds had. Karen Reed's team had things the prosecutors didn't, like at least we can say that bill and the email.
That Frank Sheridan. And that just leaves Lucky Lawford. He's the sixth one.
Okay.
So there's no other. If there were more witnesses, I'd probably have more of these hearings.
And Lucky's still
didn't see a body, Ted.
Okay.
I picture every day that they're working on framing me. And every day that they do that and I'm taking the day off, they're getting one day ahead of me. So I only feel relaxed as I can be if I'm working on the case.
Do you think there's a greater purpose in all of this?
I am not the first person this has happened to. I'm not going to be the last, sadly, but maybe there'll be fewer after me because of this. I think it's happening to people in this, I know it is, in this county, in Essex, and Norfolk, and Suffolk, and Bristol. It's happened too easily.
Were you surprised when a new prosecutor was appointed and an outside prosecutor?
Nothing surprises me anymore. What troubles me is how evil people are. And you don't need to have a strong opinion about my guilt or innocence, but you can't be an attorney in the Boston area and not see this case for what it is, and then to want to thrust yourself in it and think you can prove this beyond a reasonable doubt.
And you said
feels like she called Hank Brennan evil there with the moves he made in this case, which is interesting.
you're still receiving discovery or evidence from the state. How does that make sense after you already had a trial?
The state told us, and Canoni has echoed this, that this is a whole new trial. It's almost like a whole new case. We started getting discovery from Bates Stamp 1, page 1.
And so that's interesting. So she says that, not knowing really what they're going to turn over in a couple weeks, which is that new information, which again, if this is a new trial, it's kind of like this feels like a mountain out of a molehill. I don't want to call it a molehill because it was more than that, but if it is a new trial, maybe you wish they would have turned it over earlier, but they turned it over within the discovery period. So let's keep prepping and pushing towards a new trial. You're not going to kick the lead attorney off the case. If you do that, how do you push them to trial April 1st? And oh boy, is that an appellate issue.
Some of it is duplicative and a lot of it's new. We've gotten brand new reports from Ian Whiffen, data that we've never seen before. From Jessica Hyde, there's a doctor now, not a medical doctor, but like a veterinarian expert. We just found out today, measured supposedly Chloe's teeth. No address, no contact phone number.
Did they take molds of the teeth?
They measured the teeth, yeah.
So that's it for that. And yeah, I mean, the state or the Commonwealth definitely added a bunch of new experts. This is going to be a very different trial. We talked about that. Seems like Karen Reed knows it. And she realizes it's not just like walking it back and doing the same thing for her attorneys. They're going to have to re-prep to try this case a second time. It's going to be completely different. And I'm so interested to see how it's tried differently, how the lawyering is different. I think it's going to be completely different from that perspective. It might almost feel like the facts are different in the way that they're presented. How is Brendan going to deal with the investigation? How is he going to deal with Proctor? I really can't wait to see how all of that works, but appreciate you guys joining me. Let me know what you thought in the comment section. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, give us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. That's all we got. From now, we're out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.